Welcome back to the Backmarkers, the F1 podcast for new fans by new fans. My name is Mike Hurley, and I am joined by my team principal, Austin Evans.
Team principal.
You got promoted.
Thank you very much. Look,
Big
man,
promotion.
I'm just over here vibing to the Mexican version of the F1 theme. Can we please keep
Come
this
on.
forever? Oh,
Here's what I'll say.
Good.
I obviously loved it. I would for me, I wanted to just keep it for this one time a year. So you get the hype each time, right? Because I love the theme as it is. I think it's awesome. This is a more fun version. But this way, if this was the theme every week, you'd get bored of it, I feel like. This time, you get that little bit of flair each time. And I gotta say, every other country, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Well, step it up, every other country on the planet. Why is it just Mexico that's doing a banger version of the F1 theme?
I would love to see the F1 theme be slightly different every week. Like that would be a really cool touch. It would give us something to talk about because, boy, do we have a lot to discuss this episode of the Backmarkers.
Here's what I'll say. I feel like I have put in a problem for myself. I've said many times is I do not find any race boring. Right?
Yep.
I won't say this was boring. I will say it was a snooze fest. A snooze fest. A snooze fest of unrealized potential is what. That's what I'll say for this.
It's a snooze fest.
My problem for this race is it wasn't boring. Like I don't think it was boring. But none of the things that could have happened happened. Nothing happened. And there are other races where that would have been fine, but this felt like a race where something unexpected could happen, but nothing unexpected happened at all. That was my issue.
I mean, there was so much sort of potential here. You know, we had, now I wouldn't say mixed up, first 4 or 5 places, but we had a clear offset and tire strategy. And, with that long sort of pit straight, there's so much potential for slipstream. Yep. For, someone way back to be able to just get a mega run and just blast through everyone. And instead, I'm pretty sure the finishing order was exactly what it was after the first corner for the first, top 5, top 6, something like that. Like,
this is one of those times where, like,
instead.
I don't know what happened in NASCAR. People in the chat are talking about NASCAR. I don't follow NASCAR. This is one of those problems where the stats were an issue. The pole position winner never even gets on the podium. Like, it's all this, like, stats, right? And like, you got to watch out for the first straight in Mexico. No one, these kinds. And it was the most interesting part of the race was the opening lap, right? Because, it was all over the place. It was spicy and fiery, and everyone's going all over the shop. But then after that, there kind of wasn't anything. Do a finishing order recap. Then we'll do some follow-up, and then we can dig in a little bit more.
I would love to. So, Podium was Max P1, which actually is a new record for the most wins in the season. So, congratulations to Max. And there's still 2 more races to go, so we'll see where he actually ends up. Lewis with a very strong P2. Actually, second weekend in a row where Lewis was right up in there with maybe not a great shot of winning, but he was up there. And then Checo for his second Mexican Grand Prix podium in a row. Going down the rest of the order, we've got George Russell coming in P4. The Ferrari boys of Carlos Sainz and Leclerc in P5 and P6 respectively. We've got Danny Rick in P7. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And then we've got ourselves Esteban Ocon P8, Norris P9, and Valtteri Bottas P10, bringing in a point for his excellent qualifying.
Sauber.
What a segue, Mike.
I just like to say the name of his team, right?
It's a good name. It's a good name. Although I've heard that name might be changing soon.
I don't know if the name's going to change, actually. So, Alfa Romeo Sauber. We've spoken on the podcast in the past couple of weeks about the fact that I think it's from 2023. They will just become Sauber, most likely. No Alfa Romeo anymore. Part of the reason for this is Audi was teeing something up. And this was the rumor of, like, Audi is going to be going into Sauber. But we didn't really know what that was going to be. Is it going to be title sponsorship of engine down the line? Are they going to fully buy out the team? Well, we know more, but not the entire picture. But I think it's pretty easy to guess what the whole picture is. So in 2026, Sauber will become Audi's works team. So Audi's going to be building engines, as we've spoken about on the podcast in the past. A works team is basically an engine supplier's main outfit. Right? It's like, we're going to make an engine and other people can buy it, but there's going to be one team we know that's going to use it, and it's our team, right? So, the Mercedes-Benz work team is Mercedes, Red Bull Powertrains work team will be Red Bull, etc., right? So basically from 2026 out, it will probably be Audi Sauber, most likely, because it is currently unknown just how much Audi is going to buy of Sauber. But what has been said is they won a majority stake and will be buying portions of Sauber over the next multiple years. It kind of feels like they want to turn it into just Audi, but that might take time.
Yeah.
And also, in a way that's kind of interesting, the team will remain in Switzerland, but where are Audi going to be building their factory, or where are they building their factory? It's not in Switzerland.
I believe it's in Germany.
I think you're right. I think
which
it's
is where
Germany.
most of Audi's main, facilities are and whatnot. Yeah, I believe that's where they're building the power unit.
So it's kind of, it's interesting. I'm intrigued to see what happens to Alfa Romeo next year. Like, do they just become Sauber for like a few years? And you've got to assume that Audi might be giving them some money, because like surely it's going to be complicated for them financially for the next few years because they've lost their title sponsor.
Yeah, so it's easy to forget that Alpha, I think, are kind of unique, or aka Sauber, are kind of unique on the grid in that they're the only team who has a major sort of automotive manufacturer as a, supposedly, like actual team. But in reality, Alfa Romeo are paying them for the name of the team, right? Like, it's a Sauber team. They do use Ferrari engines, which is, associated with Alfa and sort of the overall, Stellantis conglomerate. But essentially, what we've seen is Alpha is really just Alpha in name. It's really the Sauber team. But that is going to clearly be changing. So you're right. There's still some opacity.
I like that.
Opaqueness.
Opacity, I think, is what you're looking for.
Yep. Yep. Thank you very much, my friend. In exactly what's going to go on. But I think the end result is, whether it's next year, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 4 years, whatever the case is, it seems very clear that Sauber, just like they were purchased by BMW, back in the 2000s, are being purchased in chunks, and largely, I would be surprised if it's not almost a full majority by the end of 2026, to become the Audi Works team. So yeah, my bet right now is that Audi are probably not going to want to put their name on the car until they've got their power unit in the car. So my bet is that we're probably going to go from Alfa Romeo to just Sauber for a couple of years, with Audi being like a sponsor or something. Maybe not. We'll see. But I think after that point, then they will just put all Audi badging, Audi across the board, which would be good to see. I'm excited to really see what Audi are doing, because while there's still a lot of rumors about what Porsche are doing, and there's some further rumors I saw yesterday that potentially they're going to end up buying part of Williams in a very similar deal to Red Bull, which all of this is massively speculative. It's hard to know exactly what's going to actually happen. But out of, Porsche and Audi, who both expressed a real interest in getting into Formula One this year, Porsche are kind of in no man's land. They haven't really sorted out what they're doing, whereas Audi seem like they've got the power unit facilities ready. They've got the actual team sort of locked down, and I think Sauber is a good team for Audi to acquire, right? I think they've got a competent base. It's much easier than trying to start from scratch, which I think these days is nigh on impossible. And I also think that there's some real potential in that team with the proper funding, with the budget cap, and with a spicy Audi power unit that's, going to have some quattro juice. Actually, it'd be funny if they ran their cars four-wheel drive. That would actually be very on brand, although completely and totally impossible. But just imagine an all-wheel drive car. Everyone we're
going out of the way. We're going thinking outside the box here, everyone. There's 4 wheels. Why don't we drive all of them? Let's go faster.
Oh, no, you know what they'll do? They'll go back in the old days. They'll actually bolt out. It'll be a 6-wheel car. They'll just have 4 rear wheels. It'll be quattro. See, there we go. See, Mike, they should just hire us for the technical consultants. We're the idea people. They can just execute it.
You've got team principal on your CV now. You're a hot commodity.
I do, and one day hoping to drive an actual Formula One car and prove my worth. It'll all come together one day.
Yeah, you won't be able to use the clutch, though, is the biggest issue.
I wouldn't be the only one after this race.
I'm really intrigued about Porsche. It seems like at this point, Porsche's best bet is their hardest, which is trying to set up their own team, right? Like, it feels like right now, the best option they have is the hardest thing to work out. I really feel like, honestly, and I think we spoke about this before, I think I said this before, if the main blocker to a new team is the prize money, F1 should increase the prize money.
Yeah, well, because I mean, there are ways that this could go, right? So we have at this point, we have two sort of companies, teams who want to get on the grid right now. So of course, there's Porsche, which is a massive, massive company, an incredibly prestigious name. I think everyone would love to see Porsche on the grid in one form or, well, okay, sorry. Everyone who's not actively on the grid right now would love to see Porsche on the grid. The other is Andretti, right? Who has made a lot of noise, have made a lot of kind of fanfare that they want to join the grid in one way or another, and they've pretty much just been shut down, really.
Yep.
So if you're Porsche, you could potentially team up with Andretti, split the costs, try to build a team from scratch.
Apparently they already do in another sport. I don't know which car sport it is. Car sport, which like which beep
Zoom Zoom sport is it, Mike?
Which beep honk honk sport it is that they drive in together. But like I didn't know that. I was watching a video on the race. I think it's the Race's YouTube account, and they were kind of like YouTube channel, and they were talking through some of this stuff. And I mean that's therefore seems like a good bet, but yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. The other alternative, which I would kind of lean toward maybe slightly more, is them trying to purchase a major stake in a team such as Haas or realistically Williams, right? Because let's not forget, Dorilton Capital own Williams. This is not a race team to own itself, right? This is a investment company. Yeah. They want to get their money out of Williams, which I wouldn't be surprised if they could already make a profit on it, even though it's only been, what, 2 years, 3 years?
I don't know if they're looking to flip. I think Dorilton Capital went in because they could see a future long-term potential in Formula One, and like it's a long bet, rather than a flip.
And the problem is, regardless of whichever of these sort of options that they Porsche end up going with, although I think it's very possible that they just don't get into Formula One at all, they don't have their works power unit, right? So that was one of the other things why the Red Bull deal was so sort of interesting to Porsche, because they could have gotten in, they could have actually operated with Red Bull powertrains, their own unique power unit. And like you said earlier, you know, there is a big difference between being just a manufacturer and being a works team, because yes, everyone who, you know, is running a Ferrari power unit gets the advantages and disadvantages of that power unit. But the difference is that when you are the company who are designing not only the chassis but also the engine, you can make a lot of individual things. You can tweak and tune. You can physically make it different sizes. You can kind of do whatever you want to suit your car design as an overall thing. Whereas all of the teams who are using customer engines, essentially they kind of get the power unit and they have to kind of draw their car around it. Now, is that the end of the world? No. But I think there's a real clear reason why the top teams, being Red Bull, Porsche, and Ferrari, all are full works outfits because they have all the advantages they possibly could. So it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, you know, the logical thing to me would be, hey, Porsche, use your, you know, corporate cousins Audi's brand new power unit and work with that. And I'm sure they could, but that's not going to give them the sort of optimal results. So we'll see. I'll be very excited to see if Porsche actually announce anything. But I don't know. I feel like it's a 50-50 shot. They either get in with a team or something, or they just completely bail on F1 entirely.
The Red Bull cost cap thing has been decided. So
finally, oh,
essentially, you know, it ended up not being that much money. The breach was $1.8 million, but there was an incorrectly applied tax credit, so it ended up it would have been less than it basically would have been $500,000. I will say I think that. Considering it's $500,000, I think the FIA have actually done a pretty good job at handing out, I think, a pretty sizable punishment to them. They've given them a $7 million fine, which is not included in the cost cap. It's an amount of money that Red Bull have to pay, but it doesn't come off their cost cap. And a 10% reduction in their development for their, so it's their car development time. So this could be like wind tunnel time or other bits and bobs. That's way too complicated for me to think about. The thing about this is that 10% comes off of what they will get. So they will actually drop quite a lot. I think considering the way that they're going to finish, because depending on how you finish as a team in the Constructors' Championship depends on how much development time that you get. And this could take their development time to less than Ferrari and Mercedes for next season, after that 10% is taken away. So this could end up being a bit of a hit to them, but it's not going to be a hit to them for a while, it would seem like.
Yeah. So the thing is, the sliding sort of scale on your wind tunnel time and your CFD time, already kind of gives a much bigger advantage to the lower teams. I'm going to say this off the top of my head, so forgive me if I'm wrong. I want to say it's something like the 10th place team gets like 120%, and the first place team gets like 80%. It's something.
I
to
think
that
it's
effect.
70% because I've been
70%,
seeing
yeah.
people talking about 70% a lot.
Yeah. So already, there's a fairly sizable advantage given to the smaller or the worst placing teams to kind of work their stuff out. But you figure Red Bull, which already has sort of that sort of drawback sort of built in, are going to have another 10% taken off. I agree. I think that it's important for the overall cost cap here for there to be a penalty. I don't think they could just wipe this under the rug because then people would clearly overspend. I think they really kind of put their sort of mark in the sand that, hey, this is not okay. But as we've talked about many times this year, this stuff is very complicated. The original, proposal that Red Bull submitted was like millions of dollars under the cost cap, but based on moving around something like a tax credit or how much you spend on catering if it falls in this category or that category. It's the first year that we've really properly done this. It is not surprising to me at all that something, when you're talking about well over $140 million or whatever that you have to work with, a few $100,000 being off, not that hard to do. And I'm sure that the teams are going to have their setups much better figured out going forward. But yeah,
I stand by what I said before, though, that if we're going to end up with this every year, which we might, right, that someone's over us or whatever, then the FIA need to work out some kind of system to have this reporting done on at least a quarterly basis, so they can try and understand and apply these fines more quickly or something. Because I feel like deciding it towards like 2 races before the end of the next season is not really a great kind of way to dish out a penalty, because as people said, right, I've seen a lot of people say this, like, who knows, they're going to have a lesser development time, but did they actually benefit, and that is it going to balance out? We don't know the answer to that, but I do feel like I'm happy that they actually gave them a real penalty that can affect the performance of the car. Because if they would have just taken points away from either season, it wouldn't have really changed anything. Like, it doesn't change anything. It changes things going forward. Like, I think I saw Lewis say this, right? Like, if he was given back the win now, it doesn't change the fact of what happened. And it's just a stat in a history book then. It's not beneficial anymore to anyone. Same as if they take points away from this year, it's not going to affect Red Bull at all, right? So this is an actual tangible effect for, like, you messed up. Everybody else, by and large, got this right. You messed up, so you've got to pay the price.
Absolutely, right? And I think it's a strong enough penalty, considering how small the overspend truly was. I think it's a big enough penalty to really kind of make teams sort of second guess, like if they want to maybe try to be tricky or whatever. Like, this was about as minor as an overspend could really be. And if you imagine a team went over by, millions and millions of dollars, that the circumstances would become a lot more sort of draconian when they're applying, maybe proper disqualifications or whatever, right? I mean, let's not forget, it was 13, 14 years ago that, after the whole Spygate scandal with McLaren, they got hit with a $100 million fine, right? $100 million pounds. Actually, was it dollars or pounds? I don't remember. But regardless, an absolutely astronomical fine, right? So this, I think, is small potatoes, and I think is completely sort of justified in the grand scheme of things. And most importantly, we can finally stop talking about it, because, man,
I'm happy not to think about it anymore.
I love Formula One. What I don't love is Accounting Simulator 2022.
There wasn't really much happening in the race today. As I said earlier, it was a race that felt like it had a lot of possibilities, but none of them came true. The biggest one was Mercedes, right? They had their best qualifying. They were looking as strong as they've looked at any point in the season, if not stronger, and really ended up just being a tire management, tire strategy thing between them and Red Bull. And with Red Bull's superior car, they were able to keep the distance that they needed from Mercedes. And, well, Max could keep to Lewis and Sergio could keep to George. There wasn't any change there after that. So it ended up being like, I think Mercedes went bold on their strategy in the hopes that it would give them the edge, but it didn't give them the edge that they wanted in the end.
No, it was one of those things where, sort of the race was sort of decided after that first corner, which is, I mean, the worst case scenario. Now, there are definitely some things to consider with this particular circuit, right? So many, many, many times throughout this year, we've talked about how great the overtaking was, how much better it was last year. but the altitude in Mexico City, it's something like 7,000 feet. It's massive, right? It's absolutely massive. And because of that, the air is quite literally less dense. It's only like 20 or 25% less dense than air at sea level, which has a ton of effects, right? First of all, incredibly fast. Even though all of the cars are running sort of their optimal, like their biggest downforce package as possible, they're also running as the maximum cooling, as possible. This is still, they're doing the 220 miles an hour or something down the pit straight. I mean, it is absolutely crazy the speeds they're hitting. But the downside there is that with less air, not only do the cars have less grip, but also generally speaking, you don't see quite as much of the overtaking. And that is certainly the case. Short of someone like Danny Rick, who had a major tire advantage, and that's probably the strategy thing that maybe Mercedes could have should have listened to George on in hindsight. But it's one of those things where this circuit, exactly, as much as these new cars are better when it comes to overtaking, I just think literally just the altitude and the circuit itself just does not give you that much room to work with. And it's so heavily dependent on DRS, right? Like we saw a couple of attempted passes outside DRS zones, namely when Danny Rick smashed Yuki into the wall and ripped up his side, which Danny Rick had a race. I feel like he had the most interesting race of everybody. But the tire stuff just ended up being a whole non-issue, right? I mean, there was the potential for a 2-stop. Everyone pretty much did a 1-stop. And everyone's immediately like freaking out about, it's softs are falling off and we need the, this, that, and everything. But it turned out that, going to something like the hards, which is what Mercedes did and a couple of other teams, but notably Mercedes had the option of splitting George and Lewis, and they did not. They kept them both from mediums to hards, and the hards did not work. They were not the correct call. Whereas, Red Bull were able to go with both Max and Checo, soft, medium, and they completely just easily made it to the end of the race, which obviously, that after the case, it was just so kind of disappointing because there was so much potential. Like Mercedes were properly, maybe not quite on the pace of Red Bull, but they were close to Red Bull's pace this week.
They basically were.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in race pace, they were, I would say they were still closer.
At the start of the race, Lewis was keeping up with Max big time. And then it just ended up being a strategy thing and it just didn't go their way. And that was kind of the end of the story of this race, to be honest. You mentioned Daniel Ricciardo a few times, and Danny Rick won driver of the day. He was, as you said, I agree, the most exciting driver of the day. He was doing a lot of really interesting overtakes. Probably spurred on by the fact that he had a 10-second penalty, which does give me pause because that was a real bad move on poor Yuki there. But I would be, I would feel pretty confident giving him driver of the day too. Just you say he did the most interesting stuff, most overtakes of the race, and he was having a real afternoon.
I agree. I think the move on Yuki was bad, right? That was just a stupid move. Like he got way too ambitious. Like there's no way that was not going to end in some kind of catastrophe. And unfortunately, Yuki was the one who came off sort of worse off on that, which kind of sucked because Yuki was having an okay little race there, right? Like it was not anything super exciting, but he was doing all right. But that being said, I think Danny Rick, look, there's definitely part of me which just wants to give him driver of the day because this might be the last time we ever get to do that. So, there's that. But I think what it really showed was not only that it was great to see Danny Rick with some real fire, but being on the softs at the end of that last sort of stint in the race, man, everyone on softs were absolutely flying, but none more so than Danny Rick, who, I mean, we made, like 5 or 6 overtakes in the last 20 laps or something. Like, it was terrific to watch. Whereas you see, I mean, again, hindsight 2020 as always, but you look at teams like Ferrari, right, who were absolutely nowhere, right? Like they were not anywhere near fast enough to challenge the Red Bull or the Mercedes up front, but also they were at least fast enough to stay, above everyone else. So they were just the most far away 5th and 6th ever. I think they were like plus 20, plus 30 on either side or something. Like it was just, they had absolutely nothing to lose. Maybe they could have thrown in a gamble at the soft tires, and certainly George, I'm thinking, is going to be very upset when he gets back to that pit wall. It's like, hey, I told you, let me stay on the mediums, let me go on the softs. Because, in context, that was exactly what Danny Rick did. He went medium to soft instead of the other way around, medium to hard, and it hugely paid off for him. I think it's not unreasonable whatsoever that if they would have let George get on that soft tire at the end, he would at least have made P3. And honestly, if he had anywhere close to the pace that Danny Rick did, he probably wouldn't have been at P2. Probably a little outside the actual possibility for a win. But there was a lot of pace in that soft tire, and there was nothing in the hard. And Mercedes sort of found that out the hard way.
Lewis is now P5 in the standings with George at P4, Charles at P3. Sergio has gone up to P2 now. So Red Bull have a 1-2, and I reckon they're going to finish a 1-2 as well with the drivers' championship.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because, I mean, we've got 2 more races left, right? So obviously some things are fairly sorted, but just looking at these sort of numbers, right? So Checo's only got 5 points on Leclerc. 5-point swing is not hard to overcome. Mind you, the Red Bull is looking in another league compared to the Ferrari right now. Mind you, this race was especially rough. Like, something about the altitude of the engine. Well, this was not Ferrari's race. Like, they did not have the pace in qualifying. They did not have the pace in the race. It was just not their day. But I think they should be a lot more competitive in the next couple of races. But if Checo continues to do even just a decent job, I think he's got a very good shot at that P2. And I think going down the list a little bit, I think George and Lewis are probably in for a fair shot of, at least definitely George, of beating Carlos in those standings. It's spicy, man, but also it does kind of have that sort of end of season thing where the die's kind of been cast at this point. It's almost sort of like, obviously the commentators, and of course we're guilty of this too, love to talk about the results, and we want to talk about the standings and the scores and all this kind of stuff. But in reality, what we're looking at here is everything's pretty much been sorted. There's still a few things left to kind of fight for. But generally speaking, I think these last couple of races are going to come down to the drivers driving at 100% and really driving for themselves, right? It's not going to be a bunch of team decisions. It's not going to be this, it's that. It's like, hey, you know what? You're not going to get anything. You could just take off the next couple weeks. It doesn't matter, right? Like, it's just about going out there and proving to everyone and yourself, really, that you are one of the fastest drivers in the world. And I am very excited to see, especially because, man, Brazil is such a cool track. I love watching the race there. So I'm really excited to see not next week, but 2 weeks from now, but for the next race, what we're actually able to sort of uncap, because it could get spicy, man. It could get spicy.
Who's your backmarker of the race?
Okay. So here's the thing. I don't think, whatever. I'm trying to justify.
Don't justify.
Alonso.
Okay.
Right, man. I feel like he was having a good race, nothing spectacular, but very solid race, and another engine-related DNF, which also is probably going to mean he's going to be stuck with a penalty. I don't know how many more power units he's got left, but I mean, he's gone through so many. I wouldn't be surprised if he has to take another penalty for one of the next 2 races. And man, it sucks because he's had a terrific race. He is back to those stats. He is the most experienced Formula One Grand Prix driver of all time now, right? He's got so many Grand Prix under his belt, and he's had a terrific season. And it's really unfortunate that he has just had so many problems, whether they're mechanical, whether they're caused by other people. Like, I feel like Fernando really has not done a lot wrong this year, and has absolutely just gotten wrecked in every possible way he could have been, thanks to luck, which sucks because, I mean, he's doing so great. And there's also a small part of me which is a little concerned because I'm not feeling too hot about Aston Martin next year. So it's like Fernando might be, very likely is taking a step backward for his car next year, right after he had this amazing season where he just got completely unlucky. Yep. So, yeah. But that's gonna be backmarker for me. How about you?
Sebastian Vettel. Just because he did 37 laps on a soft tire, I just think that deserves to be applauded. That's just why would you even do that? Like, it's just like, what? Congratulations, Seb. Like, why did you do that? But he did it.
Well, I think it's one of those things where, Seb also is, winding down. He's only got 2 more races left. I think Seb has been doing a solid job. And it does seem like, sort of, since he's made the decision to retire, that he's kind of, maybe the pressure's off a little bit. Maybe
free.
He's kind of out there.
Yeah.
Exactly. He's racing for him, right? Just kind of how I was saying earlier, I'm excited for these last couple of races. He's out there racing for himself. He's enjoying the twilight races of his Formula One career. And if it was me, I'd be out there just soaking up every second of it, because it's going to be real boring when you go home when you're driving on the motorway and you're like, I remember the days I used to go really fast. Back in my day, I was the world champion. I don't think Seb sounds like that, but
he could, like, in your mind. Underperformer of the race? Ferrari, right? Like,
Ferrari.
What was it? What was going on? Like, as you said, I'm sure there was a reason, but that reason led to just an absolutely forgettable race for them. Like, just terrible.
It was, I think, the farthest they've been off the pace all year. And again, it does seem like there was something specifically wrong with either their car concept or their engine at the altitude, at the race. they had no pace. There was nothing going on. Just the same way that this track really suited the Mercedes and brought what has been a far slower car all year long, kind of up in sort of contention with Red Bull. Although I guess in the race, no one could touch Max. But
They
were
ended
up
up
there.
a
But
best part of like Sainz was basically a minute behind Verstappen at the end.
yeah,
Like George
and
was
it's not even
49 seconds, but he took that late pit stop, right, to try and get
Yes.
fastest lap, which he did not get. But they tried.
Oh, I didn't see. He didn't
He
get it.
didn't get it.
Dude, that always makes me nervous when you go in, and I know, like, it's worth it for the extra point, but it always makes me nervous. You see it, someone come in the last lap, change a tire. I just always have flashbacks to Valtteri and his wheel. It's just, I don't know, man. I appreciate the jeopardy it adds, but every time some crafty team decides to come in and try to make a run for the fastest lap, I'm just like, you sure about that? You sure? You want to go throw away 15 points because you might get an extra one? All right, whatever. But hey, you know what? That's what pit crews get paid the big bucks for, right? To remember how to use the wheel gun and not shear the bolt off and have to go home. Sad.
My favorite thing from this race was every time Sergio did anything, and the crowd just goes wild. It was great. Every time he did anything, it was just even just driving by sometimes, but any pass anything. It's so good. I love how one-sided they are there for him. It's just so good. I mean, obviously there's support up and down the field, but I think everybody also just wants Sergio to do well, So it was super good. Super good.
Yeah. No, it was. There's a bunch of shots. Sergio's dad. You gotta love him. There's this great shot.
I don't know if I do. Like there's something about.
Really?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
It just seems so like genuine. He's like, that's my boy out there.
Yeah.
But there's this great shot where like Checo's there with his engineer and his dad's like on the other side of the fence, like looking down, trying to like pay attention and like listen to like what's going on as if he can like help him out. I thought that was such a good moment where dad's like literally behind the fence, like, you got this, son. You got this. Drive real fast, boy. You got this. I was just
okay, that's pretty
It warmed
funny.
my heart. It warmed my heart. I gotta say, while I generally agree with you that it was nice to see everyone super excited about Checo and seeing everyone boo Lewis wasn't great, but for me, it was Danny Rick
what
doing
is that
something.
about? What is that about?
Yeah, I think they don't like Lewis too much. I don't know. Maybe it's a Red Bull thing. I honestly don't know. Probably because Lewis kept Checo from getting P2. I honestly don't know.
I mean,
but
if that's
feel like
the
there's
reason, then whatever. You know what
I mean, look, certain fans are more passionate than others, and I think that can come out in both positive and negative kind of ways. But for me, it was Danny Rick. Danny Rick, while a boneheaded, silly move, which, look, you could say that maybe the 10-second time penalty was a little unfair. I think that's about right, honestly.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Anyone can make mistakes, right? It wasn't like Danny Rick was doing it intentionally. He really went for it a little too hard, but whatever. And he got a very serious penalty for it. And yet he made up for it and then some. And that was really exciting to see him absolutely just slicing and dicing. I mean, again, that was largely because he had the far superior tires at the time, right? So while it looked terrific and, it wasn't just like a walk in the park, but it was certainly aided by the fact that he had a huge sort of time advantage with those tires. But that being said, just the same way that we're seeing, some drivers maybe either not coming back in the future or going to the lower teams, whatever the case is, I think we got to soak up every Danny Rick sort of super late braking move or, overtake whatever we can for as long as we can, because those days might be numbered, my friend. Well, they most certainly are at this point.
Before we go, putting 22 karat gold on a race helmet is ridiculous.
Wait, what? Who did this?
Max has a new helmet to celebrate his two-time victory.
No, he does not.
And it's gold and it's with 22 karat.
I didn't know this. I don't like that. Look,
I saw the gold helmet and already thought that it was a bit much, and then I saw people like ESPN tweeted about it that it's 22 karat gold.
Oh man, Max! Look, he's obviously the world champion.
It's like gold leaf,
probably
right?
I'm sure. I'm sure it's not.
He's not playing.
He's so fast. He's got like a 17-pound helmet on. Oh yeah. Look. And he's
Tony's just confirmed in the chat. There must have been something wrong with the stats that I was looking at, but apparently George did get the fastest lap.
Oh, okay, good for him.
Sorry,
at least it wasn't for nothing.
When I was looking on motorsport.com, who I use for this information, they maybe didn't have that updated, but George did get the fastest lap.
Okay, well, congrats to George and congrats to Mercedes for making a good decision today. But yeah, like I'm not gonna comment on Max's potentially gaudy helmet. But look, he took number one. He is, I think, you could pretty convincingly argue the fastest driver in the world right now. I mean, I think he's done a phenomenal job. And the fact that he has now broken the record for the most amount of wins, the most amount of points scored, and there are still 2 races left, which it's hard to argue he would not be the heavy favorite to win both of those as well. I think 2022 is going to be very much looked back on as an absolute just unbelievably successful thing. That being said, if we can just look forward just a little bit into the future, what we've seen throughout this year is sort of Ferrari obviously started really strong, have just kind of slowed down the whole time. But Mercedes are kind of constantly sort of stepping their game up. I would be very happy to see some more Max and Lewis 1-2s next year.
I
don't care which one finishes where. I'm feeling good about it.
I genuinely like looking at where Mercedes are at this point in the season makes me feel much more confident for them next year than I did maybe even just a few weeks ago. I think the ability that they have had to take their car and consistently improve it, and the drivers consistently working to make it better, like they really have done something I don't think anybody else on the grid has done this year, which is like the level of improvement from the beginning of the season to now is huge. Where like they were lucky if they were midfield, and now that like we are going into weekends like this one thinking they might win this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, mind you, if Max wants to add a little extra gold to his helmet to slow him down, I don't think anyone would complain and make it a little bit more fair, because that's about the only thing that's going to slow him down at this point.
Yeah.
But Mike, we've got 2 races
left.
So we've got the Brazilian Grand Prix, November 13th. So we've got 1 week off, and then we're there. And then right afterward, November 20th, the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix.
Yes,
which,
Marina.
Yes, it is. And I saw something, I think it was actually last week they talked about. They're actually going to be making some tweaks, I believe, to Yas Marina for not this year's race, but for next year's race to help facilitating overtaking and whatnot, which is always nice to see, especially for these kind of, I know it's not a street circuit, but to me it always kind of feels like it's kind of flat, a little bit boring. It's always nice to see some sort of modifications and some upgrades to the circuits, but we're almost there, man.
Well, you know, look, as we've seen in the past, there are ways to make that race more exciting. You know what I mean? They found ways last year.
Yeah.
Maybe this
you know
year.
what, we could think about some ideas, right? So I think safety cars are good. I think maybe letting a few random cars in the middle get out of the way is
extra
probably a nice
cars.
idea.
No, we're gonna put 25 cars on the track.
Yes. I think we're gonna let about a dozen spectators pull their cars out on the track too at lap 35. And also we should probably decide like a championship.
Yeah.
You know what? There's just lots of ideas. FIA, if you're
Here's the
listening,
thing. Hey, Max,
boys.
you feel confident now, right? Who knows what might happen? You know what I mean? 160-point penalty for Max Verstappen.
Oh man. Well, if the last couple of races aren't spicy, at least we'll provide the spice.
Yeah, we'll do it for you.
We'll
do it for you. Yes, as I also mentioned, we'll be back in a couple of weeks now for the penultimate race of the season. For what has been a excellent season. Better than I necessarily would have thought it would have been, like because of last year's season just being so unbelievable.
Yeah.
This season has also been really exciting in a bunch of ways, in different ways, right? Like it has not been exciting after the first quarter of the season in title battle, but it's been exciting for many other reasons. Plus the racing itself has just been much more fun to watch this year. Maybe this week, not counting in that one.
Yeah. Well, look, there's a lot of races in a year. We can forget a couple of them, right?
We
it's
can forget
fine.
a
The
couple.
other ones make up. It's totally okay.
They can't all be bangers. Otherwise,
Exactly.
they wouldn't be bangers anymore, would they? You know, they would just all be
Exactly.
regular.
It would just be a regular race.
If you want to catch up with us in the meantime, we're at Backmarkers Live on Twitter. Go to Backmarkers Live for the video version of the show and backmarkers.fm for the audio version. And we'll be back for the next race. Until then, say goodbye, Austin Evans.
Adios, amigos, and welcome to the Formula One end-of-year recap races. I'm going to get a good outro eventually in my life. One day I will do it.
No, you won't.
I should just said adios, amigo.
You should have, but you didn't.
I didn't stick the landing.
All right,
Cool.
audio stopped.
Hot. Welcome to the cooldown room, my friends. I butchered that one. That was like especially bad. I'm not proud of that one.
That was real bad.
Thing is, I got a little too confident because I'm like, oh, adios amigos, that's funny. But I felt like that wasn't enough, so my mouth kept talking.
And then you did too much. Was the real problem.
I did. Mike, I could not agree more, man. I'm glad that we are kind of getting closer to the end because it's like it's a lot of races.
Yeah.
20. Wait, how many races do we have this year?
22. Yeah.
Yeah, 22. And next year is 23.
Yeah.
23. It's a lot of races.
Next year is next year 23 or is it 24?
Is it really? I know it's at least 23.
Because it was meant to be 23 this year, right? But Russia got taken off the calendar and didn't get replaced. Now, I don't know if they have a fill-in for Russia yet.
I don't know,
or if
but I think
technically Vegas is taking that spot.
Yeah. So I think Vegas is certainly going to add one more, and then China most likely. Although, again, I think it's really hard to plan too far ahead with China and their COVID restrictions. I would not be surprised if the Chinese Grand Prix gets canceled again. So I guess there's going to be a little bit of flexibility, but at the very least, it seems like going to have at least as many races as this year, plus Las Vegas.
So it will be 23 or 24 if China gets it together.
Yeah. Which what is the
China's on the calendar.
Is it earlier in the race? Because I know it used to be earlier in the season. When is it actually supposed to be held? 2023. It doesn't say. I'll find it here somewhere. Oh, well, they're selling tickets. I go buy tickets for the 2023 Chinese Grand Prix right now.
Okay.
I don't feel like that. Oh, okay. So it's April 16th. Yeah, so it's early in the year. So, yeah, I don't feel great about that race going forward. I just feel like that's gonna get canceled for a reason or another, since China is still so locked down when it comes to travel.
I would like to see it though. Is it a good track?
I hate. So when I'm driving it, I hate that sort of opening. Like you're like taking a right-hand turn and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter. Like when I'm driving it in F1, I feel like I'm like the world's biggest idiot because I'm like, oh, I think I set up. Oh no, it's tighter. Oh no, it's tighter. But yeah, Mike says that apparently Zhou Guanyu said that this weekend China's looking more unlikely. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's like right now, I know that I was reading something the other day. One of the Foxconn factories is like, they're doing their closed loop production yet again, which is super unfortunate.
What does that mean?
I think. So essentially, the way that that they handle some COVID outbreaks is that they, instead of shutting down entirely, what they'll do is they'll kind of put everyone sort of, you can't leave, you kind of are stuck, sort of go to the production line, then go back to your dorm, back and forth to ensure that work can still be done, and yet you're massively limited. And if that's the case for a few cases here and there, you've got to imagine thousands of foreigners flying in and trying to have a race is probably going to be very difficult to actually properly pull off.
Yeah.
So we'll see. I like the track, generally speaking, when I'm not the one driving it, but I don't feel great about that race going forward in 6 months' time, if even that. Like, I just don't think anything significant is going to change between now and then.
Unless they just change the policy, but there's a zero COVID policy and there's no...
They're not going to change that. They've committed so hard to that at this point.
It's really hard to come back from that, right? Like, if your policy's zero, you don't really have a lot of room for wiggling. So
yeah, it's different.
I mean, the only way is if they just like all of a sudden just say, "Hey, we beat it," and then that's the end of it, right?
Yeah, it doesn't exist
like
anymore.
That's the only way, right? Because there can't be zero. Yeah. Zero is impossible to achieve.
Yep.
So they're just going to at some point just say, "Hey, we did it, everyone, mission accomplished," and then move on.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's going to be next year, or at least not by the
would agree as well. But I don't think anyone is going to be massively upset that we'll only have 23 races instead of 24. It's still a lot.
Well, I tell you who will be upset.
Max, because he can't win 23 races in a row.
Liberty Media.
Oh, because they can't sell one more. Yeah, they got enough races. They'll be fine.
No, they won it. They got in more and more all the time, man.
You know what they'll do? They'll just do Vegas 2 nights in a row. It'll just be Vegas 1, Vegas 2. Everyone just have a good time.
We'll be at 25 races in the next couple of years, I guarantee it.
Isn't that the contractual maximum? Is 25 races?
Yeah,
I think
but
it is.
You know how you change the contractual maximum?
You just say we're doing more.
We're just doing more. Like you change it. You change it by changing the contracts, right?
Yeah, like congratulations, everyone. We do weekly races now. We do Silverstone 3 times a year. We do Red Bull Ring 7 times a year, and the rest of the tracks when we feel like it. Congratulations, welcome to Formula One.
Well, I mean, it's probably what they're looking for. Not that much, but I reckon
Yeah.
I reckon we'll be at like 26 races within a few years or something like that. So like half the year or whatever.
Yeah, man, we'll see. I don't know. I definitely feel, and obviously I think it's maybe a little different for us since we're actually, doing a show and everything. But even just as a fan, it's a lot, right? Like it's one thing if it's a race every other week, and then there's a couple weeks off here and there, and then there's a back-to-back race. Like
Yep.
that 20-ish races, like that feels fine. But when you get to like back-to-back races, and it's it's running from what March to December, it's just like you're just on and waking up at 5 a.m. It does feel like it kind of the last few years, but almost more so this year specifically. I'm kind of tired, man.
It's harder for you for sure than it is for me.
Yeah.
The only downside for me is it makes planning some things more difficult. Like if I want to watch the races, there are like there's things I can and can't do, and so it makes dealing with life a little trickier. Like as everyone knows, right? Like if you want to watch the races, well, you might have to leave somewhere early. You might have to skip out on some plans. Like
it's difficult. It's a lot, right? And it's like the more races you add, I think it just makes it more difficult. And of course, this is just kind of talking about from our perspective. It's not talking about the teams, the journalists, everyone, the traveling circus that has to go. Not only just sort of, but from place to place, from country to country, 12-hour flight. Like, I mean, to think
if
that,
F1 happened in one country, this wouldn't be so complicated.
NASCAR.
Because like all other sports, no, but even America feels too big to me as a country to do something like that. But like, let's just imagine all F1 races were raced at Silverstone, right? There was just like 20 races a year and they were all done at one track. That's a completely different beast then. Like that's a very manageable thing. That's like most sport, right? Like no one has an issue here with how many Premier League football games occur in a year. They play twice a week, right? For the season, right? It's like no one's talking about like, oh, it's so grueling, right? Like that's just not really a thing that comes up like in other sports so much. It is because it's like this worldwide sport, right? Where it's like it makes that calendar much harder.
Yeah.
All right, I got to wrap.
We'll see.
Thank you, everyone.
Good.
We're back in a couple of weeks. Bye-bye.
I was gonna say I can't say. There's not like a Yaz joke, but there's got to be some.
Well, it isn't
cool
Yaz
Brazil
yet.
joke. I've got like 2 weeks to think about some good Brazil joke, some good pun.
Yep.